Hey everybody, MS Farzan here, and in this video I'd love to talk to you about art for the Entromancy role-playing game. Art is such a funny and interesting topic for me, in that I'm in love with different types of art, specifically fantasy and sci-fi. Yet I'm a terrible artist. I have literally no graphic design talent or skill, as you can probably see by the graphical elements in these videos that you've been watching. But I have an image in my mind of what Entromancy as a world and the characters in the Entromancy fiction, what they look like. And translating that is so difficult for me because I've been writing about them, but I have no artistic skills, so I have no way of really displaying to someone what they look like. Fortunately, I know a really great artist. I'll link you to some of her work in the comments below, in the description below this video. And she has been able to actualize and realize the ideas that have been in my head of what these characters look like, about what this world looks like, about what the Entromancy fiction would look like if it were to come to life on paper in illustrations. So we know that we need art for the role-playing game, and we know that that consists of illustrations, it consists of logos, it consists of layout design, and I'll talk about the layout and the design of the book in a future video. Right now I just want to talk about art in terms of illustrations and deciding on a direction for the art for the Entromancy role-playing game. My artist, who is really good, really experienced, and really smart, as you can see from her images, the first thing that she wanted us to do is concept how is the game going to look like, how are the characters going to look like from a mood perspective, creating what is called a mood board. Generally, when you create any piece of art in the video games industry, for example, or in marketing, you'll do what's called a creative brief. You might sit down with your partners in the group, or with your team members, or with the artists themselves, and you'll create what's called a creative brief, meaning it has an idea of what is the mood of the piece that you're trying to make, what is the piece going to be used for, what are some examples of the competitive pieces that might give the artist an example that they can look at. What are essential design elements? What are the colors? Those sort of things. Giving the artist or the art team an idea of what you're looking for with as much specificity as possible, so that they can hopefully create something that looks well enough for you, either on the first attempt or the second attempt or the third attempt, without having to do a bunch of versioning, because you just said, I want a picture of an elf, and they come back with a Keebler elf, and you're like, I meant a Lord of the Rings elf, and then they have to go back and forth and design again and design again. You're trying to slim down that process as much as possible by providing them with enough information to go on from the outset. So I created sort of like a creative brief for the artist, and she encouraged me to put together a mood board, essentially drawing images from the internet, whether they be similar to the characters that we have in our game, or similar to the environment, or even just colors, anything that could encourage her to look at examples that could actually be in our game if they were tweaked, or if they were reproduced in a way that felt more natural for our setting, which is a cyberpunk setting set in San Francisco in 2076. So I sent her a bunch of examples, mostly for the characters and some environments. And let me just say that she's really good at what she does, so she was able to reproduce some concepts that look pretty genuine. I'll share a few of these with you at the end of this video. And some of these concepts that I sent over are like just me Googling cyberpunk or cyberpunk characters, or looking at competitive titles like Shadowrun, or looking at maybe Googling something like futuristic elves, or I can't remember exactly what I sent to her. But she was able to kind of create a pastiche from all of these different examples and then with my own feedback about who are the characters in the Entromancy novels, who are the characters in the character classes in the Entromancy role-playing game. So sharing with her specifics about the classes and how they work, what are descriptions of the classes both in the book and in the game. And she was able to reproduce some really cool stuff. I know I said that I would talk about layout later, but I think this is also germane to the discussion, is that with my layout designer, we looked at a lot of different color concepts and color ways and a lot of other images, some of the same images regarding cyberpunk, but trying to identify a mood board or almost like a style guide for the Entromancy role-playing game. And where we've landed on that, that influences both design and layout, is that it's a cyberpunk game, and the Entromancy series is a cyberpunk fiction, science fiction and urban fantasy series, but it's a bit more urban fantasy than it is like glam and glitz cyberpunk, if that makes sense. It definitely finds its influences in things like Shadowrun and things like The Matrix. It has some of the Harry Dresden, the Dresden Files urban fantasy in it. It definitely also finds some of its experience in Neuromancer, although not as high tech. I mean, there's definitely some high tech in there, and hacking and all of that good stuff that you expect with cyberpunk. But the design direction for it is very much grounded in urban fantasy as well as cyberpunk. And an interesting thing that we took away from all of the research that we've done between myself, the artist, and the layout designer, is that not only does cyberpunk have a lot of grittiness to it, juxtaposed underneath a lot of neon, whether it be neon blue or neon green or neon pink, whatever. Cyberpunk has a lot of that, so we want to keep a lot of that good stuff. But it also is very futuristic with a throwback to the 80s. There's a lot of 80s stuff in cyberpunk fiction, in cyberpunk illustrations, in cyberpunk art and drawings and design. And we want to twist that a little bit because we want to differentiate ourselves from every other cyberpunk game that is out there. And I think our game is doing that, and our fiction is doing that in a really powerful way. And we want our art to do that in the same way. So we're going, rather for cyberpunk 80s, we're going for cyberpunk 90s. So a lot of, and we'll see exactly how this pans out, as this is all work in progress, as you can see by the images here. But taking influence from the 80s for conventional cyberpunk, and kind of shifting that into the 90s. So more like high tops, more high top shoes, more maybe like bubble graffiti art type stuff, more colors and color swatches that engendered the feeling of hip hop 90s mixed with cyberpunk, rather than just doing a traditional 80s cyberpunk where you have stuff that feels very neon and also very maybe very industrial, very new wave. We're kind of shift that so that it's a bit more softer, a little bit more round. The colors are a little bit more specific to the 90s in terms of the throwback element of the cyberpunk. And of course, running through that is the urban fantasy that is very much part of the Entromancy fiction. It's a really interesting process. It's kind of strange for me, having written the book a while ago, and now kind of diving back into what was the original vision for the book, so that we can transpose that onto art and create illustrations and characters that are specific to that original vision. But it's also really awesome. It's a really interesting experience, and I'm really grateful to have artists and a layout designer that are able to put to paper what I have in my mind about what the book looks like, what the characters look like, and what the game looks like in terms of illustrations and layout. Like I said, we'll talk more about layout and logos and all that stuff later, but here's a glimpse into one of the characters in the character classes in the Entromancy role-playing game. This is very much FPO, or work in progress art, and it will be integrated very differently into the final game. But I want to give you a glimpse as to what the revolutionary class in the game looks like. She's based on Vashka Lestrade, who is a character in the Entromancy fiction. If you've read the first book, very awesome, very BA, very gunslinger slash Western mixed with cyberpunk mixed with she's a dwarf, so she's awesome, and very nimble. You should read the book. You'll learn a lot more about her than just what I'm presenting to you in this video. But yeah, kind of like a little bit of idea of what we're going for in terms of very heavy inks, sort of stylized rather than photorealistic, and yeah. I hope you enjoy it, and like I said, it's a work in progress, so there's a lot more to be done with it. It doesn't really represent the colors that we'll be seeing in the book, but hopefully with the other images that you've seen in this video, you'll kind of be able to start piecing together what we're going for, and we'll have more to share soon. Thanks so much for watching. Be sure to subscribe to my channel and follow me on Twitter for more crunchy content.